They called him coward. He kept sweeping the blood-colored sunrise off the tiles. The first bell had not rung, yet the hall already hummed with a rumor that sounded like a dare. A bucket sloshed, a key turned, a door sighed, and the world of lockers and trophy glass woke up to its own echo. He moved, like someone who knew how to be unseen, a tide that cleans the shore, then retreats before the footprints begin. Laughter flared from the far corridor, bright and brittle, and the word came again, tossed like a coin to buy attention. He did not look up. The mop traced a narrow river that led to the locker room, where steaming gathered and bragging stacked in noisy piles. When the pipe screamed and burst, metal shrapnel of water and shame, he reacted on instinct and not pride. Fingers went to his collar, fabric tore, and the old scar caught the fluorescent glare like a warning flare. Something small and purple blinked against his chest, and the room forgot how to breathe. The rumor moves faster than the bell. By the time the hallway fills, the air has the charge of a storm that forgot its rain. Screens balloon with half-truths and hasty captions, 100 small verdicts thrown like pebbles at a window that will not break. He keeps working, and the path he leaves behind shines like a vow. She tracks him from a distance, lens steady, mind racing, unsure whether she is chasing a story or being chased by it. Jokes skim across the surface, then sink. The word that once felt safe to say out loud now sticks in a few throats and comes out quieter, unsure of its own spine. Something sacred has been tugged into daylight, and no one knows where to put their eyes. The floor smells of bleach and panic. The bell rings late in the bones. The office smells like old coffee and decisions made yesterday. The door clicks, and the room folds into a type of quiet that has numbers attached to it. Statements about budgets and liability take the shape of guardrails, kind at first, then firmer. He stands near the file cabinet and studies a single scuff on the floor while polite words try to shepherd him toward the exit that everyone pretends is a favor. Outside, a drill team practices and the faint thump of a drum keeps misplacing the beat. No one says the word that cracked the locker room open, not here. Not with diplomas on the wall. The silence does the talking in clean sentences. When he leaves, the window shows only his shoulders and the sky beyond, and both look heavier than before. The joke arrives, dressed like an accident. A bucket tips. Water finds its hunger and runs. Laughter rolls over the tile and tries to turn into a victory song. But something in the melody falters. He does not slip. He does not curse. He simply plants his feet and rescues what will not float. The crowd waits for outrage to justify their script, but it does not come. The script falls apart without its final line. In the cavern of the locker room, the broken pipe stain still glistens. A witness no one can intimidate. The grin fades on one face, then another. Even the phones are slower to rise. Quiet grows a jaw. In the mirror, a medal that should be hidden leaves a ghost. The day tries to stitch itself back together and fails at every seam. Hallways settle, then twitch. The room with the benches smells like copper and soap, and memories that do not belong to children rattle the vents. He kneels and twists the valve, and the hiss becomes a sigh. In the mirror, a stranger holds a ribbon that remembers cold nights and sirens that only a few ever hear. He tucks it away as if putting a secret back into the ground. Footsteps approach and halt. The way people stop at a cliff. A single apology starts in one mouth and dies before it can walk. The water in the drain keeps talking. Softer now, the sound of a burden deciding to stay. Outside, a whistle practices finding a kinder pitch. By second period, the story has grown teeth and a tail, sprinting through homerooms and skipping stairs, two at a time. It molts as it travels, shedding the parts that don't fit a good headline and keeping the glitter. 100 voices swear they were right there, that they saw the moment a secret rose out of water like a survivor from a capsized boat. The adults try to tamp it down with announcements that sound like umbrellas in a hurricane. He mops where the flood ran wild and pretends the floor is the only thing asking for mercy. A bell rings and no one moves. Somewhere, a whistle blows, and no one laughs. The day keeps pretending it is ordinary while the edges curl like paper near a flame. In the reflection of a locker, the ribbon is already gone, but the light where it had flashed keeps repeating itself on the metal, as if memory were a bulb that refuses to cool. In a dim edit bay that is really a storage closet, the truth plays without sound. The footage trembles with fluorescent flicker and the breath of the camera, showing details that hurry misses. There is the hand that does not shake, the step that lunges toward the danger before anyone thinks to shout, the reflex that belongs to training older than everyone in that room. Pause and the water becomes glass, unbroken except for a glint that might be a metal or a shard of light. Rewind, and the insult is still a grin with shaky scaffolding beneath. She leans closer until the pixels feel like a confession. The floor beneath the chair is cold, the kind of cold that belongs to metal benches and field tents in places this town cannot pronounce. Outside, laughter tries on a different voice. Inside, a story starts to choose its spine. The office door closes and the room decides to be a ring. Old rules come down from the walls with the team banners, insisting that toughness sounds like thunder and anything quieter is weakness. Words march out in cadence full of drills and debts, trying to force the present into a jersey that does not fit. He stands listening, not protesting, as if apology were a season he has already lived through and expects again. The man across from him believes in storms more than rain, in noise more than truth, and yet even his voice carries a tremor that was not there last week. Somewhere outside, a marching pattern thumps and misses a beat. The silence that follows the lecture tastes like copper and chalk. When the door opens, the hallway steals the heat, and what remains behind is a chair imprint, a whistle cooling on a desk, and a sentence that never learned how to end. Night returns the school to its breathing, and in the empty corridors, the work becomes a liturgy. He moves from spill to scuff to stain, reading the floor like a journal, pausing at the places where the day bled most. The machines hum with the kindness of old engines. A radio somewhere murmurs a song about a river that forgets nothing. He locks doors the way a medic knots a bandage, firm and gentle, then checks the windows to be sure the world cannot sneak in to finish what it started. The clock in the lobby ticks with the confidence of a metronome, counting out a tempo that once kept time with rotor blades and boots. The building sighs. He returns the mop to its corner and sits for a moment in the quiet, letting it teach him what to do with a morning that will not apologize. He had meant to walk past, to let the murmur wear itself out, but the sight of the metal on a desk turned his breath into gravel. The shape was smaller than the stories he had told himself, and the color carried a weight he could not lift. A door frame became a border he could not cross. The eyes in the room did not know where to land, because reverence and guilt do not share space well. Across the gap, the man who had poured the joke onto the floor stood with hands that had forgotten how to perform. The word everyone used yesterday would not come today, as if the alphabet had misplaced it. The hush was not empty. It was crowded with reckonings, lined up like chairs at a service where the speaker hasn't arrived. When he finally stepped forward, it felt like breaking a seal on a letter addressed to both of them. The hall with the flag-stained ceiling breathes like a lung that remembers smoke. She enters with a camera that feels too young for the room, and lays a still frame on the bar, a captured flare of metal and water. The old man behind the counter studies the picture, the way a medic studies a wound, not looking at the shine, but at the edges where story leaks out. His finger traces a patch barely visible on a pocket, and in his whisper, the town's map folds open to reveal a road no one here has driven. The jukebox offers a song to break the silence and thinks better of it. She listens to a name for a place that tastes like dust and copper, then another name for a boy who didn't come home and the one who did. Outside, daylight leans thin through Venetian blinds. Inside, a truth unbuttons itself one clasp at a time. When she leaves, she carries less footage and more weight. The conference room wears its carpet like a hush. Numbers arrive first, stacked into tidy towers that leave no room for breath. Reputation is counted like currency, and the ceiling vents hum with the effort of pretending this is just about optics. She keeps her voice even, the way you speak to a trembling animal, and offers policies as if they were blankets. Beneath the table, a heel scrapes a rhythm that has nothing to do with budgets. In another building, a whistle searches for a gentler note. Here, the talk circles a wound it refuses to name. The choice sits between doing what keeps the phones quiet and doing what lets people sleep. The clock hands are blades. When the meeting ends, the room exhales and the chairs roll back as if relieved to stop pretending they know the right answer. In the doorway, she pauses and looks toward the hallway where a bucket will soon mirror the lights. Some wars happen where the floor smells like bleach. Some happen on screens that never need to be mopped. The night recruits with notifications, and every vibration is a drumbeat calling cowards to the Colosseum of comments. Jokes sharpen, then multiply, then forget they were ever jokes. A boy stares at the glow that keeps his face from choosing an expression and watches his own fingerprints seed the storm. The silence between the messages is where the truth tries to breathe. The storm crowds it out with memes and edits that reward cruelty with attention. Somewhere in the noise, the image of a medal becomes a badge for mockery, and the cost of that transformation never appears on any invoice. When the battery runs low, the room finally reveals itself. A bed unmade, a trophy tilted, a poster curling from the corner like a hand letting go. Morning returns with the smell of floor wax, and a resolve that does not announce itself. Questions drift behind him like kites without wind, tugging for attention. But he keeps his hands busy, and his answers quiet. The lens finds him anyway, patient and polite, offering space and saying please. He shakes his head once, not in refusal, but in respect for something that belongs to silence. The cartwheels click in a pattern that would make a marching band straighten up. A door opens, then closes, because some stories are not ready for air and some wounds don't like microphones. The hallway learns a new etiquette. Step around the reel, speak softer near the bucket, let the man finish the square he started. By the time the bell throws its voice across the lockers, the floor shines with the kind of truth that doesn't fit in captions. By noon, the building tastes like rain about to start, and the lobby doors open to a woman carrying a small archive in a cardboard cradle. The tape gives way with the sigh of an old house, and the scent of paper climbs into the air, dry and electric. Inside are letters that forgot how to arrive, maps stained with a geography of fear and loyalty, photographs that insist on naming the unnameable. She does not speak first. She lets the objects introduce themselves. He appears from a corridor as if called by a bell only he can hear, and the distance between them is measured in unmailed envelopes. The box waits on a bench, like a verdict neither one requested. When the lid lifts, something unspools that has been coiled for decades, and even the lights seem to step back to give it room. The day lowers its voice and listens. Paper cracks when it remembers. The first letter breathes out a place where the air tasted like metal and heat, and the handwriting leans forward as if running towards someone who will never reach the end of the road. Maps unfold to show a vein of dirt lined with tire ghosts, a date circled twice, an hour that refuses to change no matter how long you look at it. The words describe a convoy crawling through a valley that kept its own counsel, then the sound of a world turning inside out. One body pulled free, another hand slipping away, and the sentence that follows is so careful, it feels like walking through a room full of sleeping rifles. A photograph presses two young smiles against the present until both begin to blur. The room holds its breath. The pages will not look at anyone directly. When the last envelope opens, there is no moral written on the flap. Only the quiet arithmetic of what it costs to step toward danger and what it costs to keep breathing after. Truth becomes truer when it is measured. She tapes a timeline along the wall, and the hours begin to argue until they finally agree on a single shape. Video frames line up with the ink of old sentences, and the spaces between them glow like answers just out of reach. She listens again to water turning to noise, then to silence, then to breath. Across the glass, a reflection gathers that is not hers. A face that has preached hardness until it grew tired of its own sermon. The map from the box dictates distance and direction, and every marker on the wall becomes a heartbeat counted twice. She erases a line and draws another, and in that small act, the room shifts toward a new gravity. Outside, cleats scuff the hallway, then stop, as if the world has leaned in to overhear. When she steps back, the story looks less like rumor and more like witness. In a room where trophies watch like quiet judges, a drawer sticks on the life it has been guarding. The file inside smells of dust and intention. The form has a government logo and blank spaces that never learned the names they were waiting for. A signature line stays empty, and the date drifts like a raft cut loose. Beside it lies a picture of a man who taught jokes to wear armor, smiling in a way that feels unfamiliar now. The edge of a folded pamphlet peeks out with promises about benefits and the word eligible that once sounded like a doorbell. The boy who opens the drawer feels his own story turn and look at him. When the light shifts, the photograph throws a thin beam across the form as if urging completion from beyond reach. The room is suddenly small enough that truth touches every wall at once. Breathing becomes a decision. The gym keeps echoes, like a church keeps candles. The drumline in the far lot starts a cadence that wanders inside through vents and steel, a rhythm that knows the shape of marching feet and helicopters beating the air into obedience. He stands at center court where lines cross and tries to swallow the sound before it finds him. It arrives anyway, wearing a memory of a valley that will not release its dead. The shine of the floor turns to a strip of road. The bleachers become dark hills. The lights burn as bright as noon in a place where noon meant danger. He feels the old tremor begin at the wrists and run toward the heart, a wave that has waited years for permission to break. There is no audience to witness the surrender, only a whistle on a distant lanyard finding a kinder note. When the cadence stops, the quiet roars. He lowers himself to the wood and lets the roar pass through. The bar smells like lemon oil and old luck. He pours a soda as if it were medicine and sets it on the coaster with the precision of someone who once wrapped bandages in the dark. The story he tells does not flatter anyone. It remembers mud that tried to claim boots and a sky that refused to offer witness. It remembers a boy who ran back for one more body and returned carrying a silence that never set him down. The medal was delivered like a verdict, and the ribbon became a lock he chose to keep against his throat because the door it guarded would not stay closed. He speaks of nights when the air thinned and the ceiling lowered until there was only a narrow tunnel out of memory. The way through became work and routine and small kindnesses that asked for nothing. When the telling ends, the glass is empty, and the room has moved closer without scraping its chair. The word appears overnight, swollen and black, dripping down the chipped blue paint like a verdict that enjoyed being written. Morning air holds the sting of solvent in winter, and a small crowd forms with the appetite of spectators at a slow crash. Phones lift, then lower, as if shame weighed more than glass today. He does not summon a speech or a witness. He fetches a bucket, twists a rag until it squeals, and begins the patient work of erasing. The letters smear first, growing uglier before they fade, a ritual every stain insists upon. Someone giggles, then swallows the sound when the smell of bleach rises like a memory that bites back. A camera hovers at the edge of the circle, respectful and steady, refusing to turn this into sport. The door returns to its ordinary damage, scratches and dents that do not require a headline. When he finishes, the rag hangs like a surrendered flag, and the hallway breathes out, as if surprised to find itself cleaner than it deserves. At lunch, the room roars the way rooms do when hunger and gossip meet, but a pocket of quiet opens near the milk cooler. A tray clatters down, and a voice that usually rides on laughter arrives without armor. Words stumble, then find their feet. Not an excuse, not a performance, just a sentence shaped like a bridge. The first chuckle surfaces from the back, reflex managing fear, and then another. But they falter when the eyes at the center don't flinch, when the apology does not beg or barter. Silence spreads table by table until even the vending machines seem to listen. A chair scrapes. A hand lifts in a small, awkward salute that means more than it pretends to. The light through the high windows catches dust and makes it look like snowfall. Somewhere, a whistle squeaks and stops, as if remembering the new pitch it is trying to learn. The moment holds, fragile and sufficient. A sea daring the room to make space for it. The decision begins as a memo and grows teeth as it travels. An assembly is authorized, a gathering meant to turn rumor into witness. But the phone lines hum with the old arithmetic of fear dressed as thrift. Words like optics and liability arrive in polite fonts, each sentence trying to fold a human weight into a spreadsheet cell. She holds the receiver the way a diver holds breath, listening to a list of reasons why honoring one story might bankrupt a dozen others. Outside, footsteps practice a march they have not learned yet. Inside, she drafts a statement that chooses clarity over comfort and hits send before doubt can sharpen its blade. The reply comes back fast and cold, an objection that shivers the glass. She sets the handset down and looks at the empty chairs that will soon face a stage. The quiet between ringtones feels like a target and a promise. On the wall, the flag's edge barely moves in the vent's breeze. Stubborn and steady, it happens fast and looks slow. A shoulder bumps a bucket, a slosh becomes a shove. Voices rise into the register where blame breeds. The first accusation is loud and practiced, the kind that counts on echoes to do half the work. He does not answer with heat. He steadies the handle, secures the wheels, and asks if everyone is all right. That should be the end. But the crowd wants more story than kindness can provide. A hand jabs the air, a finger nearly touches a chest, and authority arrives already exhausted. The report writes itself in phrases that choose certainty over accuracy, and the signature lands like hail. A paper with the word suspension walks down the hall wearing boots it did not earn. He takes it without flinch, folds it once, and tucks it into a pocket that has carried worse. In the glass of the trophy case, a reflection shows a face learning how to be braver than yesterday's courage. Dusk softens edges the way mercy does. In the quiet outside the side entrance, a box returns like a tide, bringing back what the day tried to carry off. Paper rustles with the authority of years. A map emerges, creased to the point of tenderness, its margins tattooed with coordinates in a hand that shakes a little now, and a photograph follows, different from the one already shown. This one caught between laughter and the squinting sun. On the back, a line written in pencil has survived sweat and summers. Keep him safe. The request arrives decades late and perfectly on time. The camera does not intrude. It witnesses the passing of weight from one set of hands to another, the quiet contract that stories sign when they decide who will carry them next. Above the door, a light flickers and steadying itself becomes a kind of benediction. Somewhere inside, chairs are being set for a gathering that has already begun. The cafeteria becomes a theater because a bedsheet and a borrowed projector decide it can be. Lunch tables knit into rows, lights dim to a nervous dusk, and a hush drops that tastes like metal and citrus cleaner. The first frame arrives raw, the colors uncorrected, edges breathing, truth unvarnished. Water explodes from a pipe again, but this time the sound is only in memory, and the room supplies it without effort. A hand reaches for a valve, a ribbon flashes, and a gasp travels like a fuse from one corner to the next. Laughter tries to form and retreats, replaced by the brittle clink of someone's spoon against a tray, and then nothing at all. Faces on screen and faces in the seats. Trade places until the distance vanishes. The credits are just dates and a map edge, and still no music comes to rescue anyone. When the light returns, no one stands quickly. The film doesn't end so much as settle, like dust finding its home. Silence lingers as if the room is waiting for permission to breathe again. Then a chair scrapes back and the bulky shape of authority steps into the aisle without its armor. Words arrive stripped of ceremony, a confession spoken in the simple grammar of wrong and the harder vocabulary of change. A small object lifts, an emblem once used to corral boys into thunder, now offered like a flag, lowered in respect. The gesture is not tidy. Hands tremble. A few in the back scoff out of habit, but it dies quickly, smothered by the feeling that something weighty has shifted from shoulder to shoulder. The old man does not rush to claim or reject. He studies the gift as if it were a photograph from another life, and then nods once, not for theatrics, but to acknowledge a bridge strong enough to stand on. The room exhales. No applause follows, only the softer sound of people relearning how to look at one another. After the crowd dissolves into murmurs and corridors, a smaller truth asks for space. A boy who has trained his face to perform ease lets it rest, and in the quiet, the real weight shows. He speaks of a form found in a drawer, the boxy language of an application orphaned by fear. The way a dream can curdle into secrecy when a single test score or heartbeat says no tale. He speaks of the shadow that refusal cast across a home, of the jokes built to hide it, of rage borrowed from men who deserve better than to carry someone else's shame. The listener does not interrupt. He knows the gravity of unclaimed papers, the ache of what if stacked in closets. Advice when it comes is small and practical, a rope thrown across a narrow river. Start with one apology, one appointment, one honest sentence. The boy nods, relief and grief braided, and the hallway returns their voices to them gentler than before. When the story finally leaves his throat, it arrives without heroics, built from measurements and seconds and smells. He describes heat that flattened thought, the iron taste of dust, the way a convoy becomes a classroom where the lesson is velocity and the test is luck. He recalls the blast like a door blown off a house, the shape of a friend's helmet tumbling end over end, the arithmetic of choosing left or right in a fog of noise. He remembers running toward the wrong shape of safety and finding a body that still had breath, the weight of it across his shoulders, the distance to the ditch that might as well have been a mile. The medal came later, as paperwork and ceremony, while the quiet woke up each night with its hands around his windpipe. The ribbon stayed hidden because the world loves symbols more than scars. He speaks until the room feels bigger, until the hardest word loosens and falls. The decision is not thunderous. It arrives as raised hands, counted carefully in a room that smells like dry erase and old carpet. The proposal is plain. A hallway of names and stories where sweat once pooled and laughter once hid its knives. Arguments sputter, then soften, as if the sight of simple truth on a screen had sanded the edges off every counterpoint. Someone suggests a plaque near the lockers. Another adds a bench. A third asks for a glass case, so medals can be borrowed by courage and then returned. The vote passes with more yes than anyone predicted. Outside, students drift past without knowing a hinge just swung. Inside, a pen scratches across minutes that will outlast this year's banners. There is no music, only a shared breath, the small click of a gavel, and the quiet choreography of people who have decided to carry something together. Morning arrives with flags waking on their poles and shoes learning a slower rhythm. The town gathers in lines that are not perfect, but feel honest. A braid of bands and strollers, and men who once marched faster than memory. The path from the school to the square smells like cut grass, brass polish, and bakery sugar drifting from a street no one will use until later. At the front, an old man holds nothing but pace and breath, and the hush that trails him is wider than any street. People who used to throw jokes lower their eyes, not from shame but from respect finding its proper height. Name after name rings from a portable speaker that crackles like a campfire. Each syllable adds a stone to the river they are crossing. Cameras lift without greed. When the bell in the courthouse tower marks the hour, the procession pauses, and in that brief stillness the entire town hears what kept one man standing when everything else fell. Back at the school, the hallway that once echoed with easy cruelty now waits dressed for ceremony. A cloth covers a new rectangle in the wall, and the space around it feels like the breath before a vow. Words are spoken into a microphone that does not try to sweeten them. An apology, a gratitude, a request that learning include listening. Faces that were sharp last month are softened by the work they have done since, and by the sight of a man who chose to keep showing up. The fabric lifts and the plaque appears, dull bronze with names that weight the air, a small case beside it ready to hold borrowed courage. A key on a chain changes pockets. A door that was closed opens without protest. Around the edges, laughter starts to return, not as a shield, but as something earned. The day brightens by 1 watt, and the building, it seems, decides to keep that light. The gym turns into a darkened throat, and everyone sits inside the voice. A sheet becomes a screen again. The rough cut has seams, but the stitches are made of witness and hold stronger than gloss. Images breathe. Water like shrapnel hands at a collar, the aftermath that shook a room's vocabulary free. Between cuts, there are letters held up to the light, and a map that learned the shape of a valley the hard way. The crowd does not applaud the sharpest edits. It leans forward when silence arrives, a long swallow in which the film lets the faces in the seats do the talking. Somewhere in the middle, a boy wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, the way he once did sweat after a win. At the end, the screen stays white and the room stays quiet. And that quiet feels like a discipline finally learned. When lights rise, no one is new, but everyone is changed. Later, when the crowd thins to the kind of company a moment needs, he stands before the plaque as if before a shoreline he has finally reached. The medal sits in his palm, smaller than rumor, heavier than any word thrown at him. He thinks of a night that rewrote a dozen lives and of the years he kept busy so the quiet would not undo him. The ribbon around his neck has warmed to the shape of his days. He unclasps it, studies the thin cord, then threads the medal into the waiting case and lets it settle. There is no speech, only a breath that sounds like a gate swinging. He touches the glass, not to claim or to apologize, but to acknowledge that some burdens belong to more than one set of shoulders. Then the ribbon returns beneath his collar, not as a secret, but as a promise to keep working. The hallway seems to stand straighter when he steps away. Evening leans its blue elbows on the town and the rails carry a tired hymn. By the siding, wind moves through weeds with the patience of someone who has outlived apologies. A freight crawls past, each car a box of stories that will never meet, and the gaps between wheels beat out a metronome that remembers boots and rotors and a heartbeat that refused to quit. They stand together without choreography, a loose crescent around a patch of gravel that has seen everything. No one asks for a lesson. No one asks for a moral. They practice a different courage, the sort that listens. When the last car passes, the quiet it leaves is clean and large enough to hold what they are trying to carry. Far off, a whistle finds the kinder note it has been learning. The town exhales. The night accepts the breath and gives it back as something like peace.